I'm continuing to read through Buddha by Tezuka Osamu. This is part 5. I've finished now. So after this, only 3 more volumes yet to go. There are 8 volumes in total. Now, volume 5 is confusingly enough part 4. I think I talked about this in my previous video when I reviewed volume 4, which was part 3, meaning I don't really understand how these number systems are working, but this is part 4, volume 5. Now, at this point in the series, we have any number of characters. I was going to say side characters, but it's really hard to tell who the main character is in this comic. At various points, it doesn't even appear to be Buddha, at least certainly not for the first half of this volume. It's more of the adventures of Tatcha and Migalia, his wife, and Devadatta. Now, Tatcha and Migalia have been through so much in this series so far, and get put through the ringer yet again in this volume, where Migalia gets framed for murder and loses her voice because of a poison. So yeah, it's it's a little bit difficult, or maybe more than a little bit difficult, to tell what exactly the story arc is here, because it just seems to be these characters just having a lot of ups and downs with no smooth character arc throughout this series. But I think maybe I've adjusted my expectations to fit this series. So when I first started this, I was expecting this to be like a graphic novel. I mean, it's in 8 volumes, but I was expecting it to be like one coherent story over 8 volumes. But I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I think this is a comic which ran in the comic book magazines in Japan for a number of years throughout the 70s and the 80s. And it's more of like a collection of comic book runs rather than like one coherent story. I think that's the appropriate way to look at this. So Japanese manga, generally speaking, is different than American comics. American comics, especially DC and Marvel, will have a character like Superman who they just keep in print continuously for like the past 90 years, or other characters like that. Japanese manga, there are some exceptions. There are some comic books in Japan which have just gone on forever, but generally speaking, they have much shorter runs. But that doesn't mean that they're always just kind of one neatly self-contained story. During the time when they're being churned out weekly or monthly or whatever it is in the magazines, they are, for that time, episodic and based on individual issues. So, despite the fact that this thing as a whole is giving Buddha's biography very loosely, I don't think the appropriate way to look at it is like as one story with smooth character arcs and kind of like a rise and fall and redemption or any of that kind of thing. I think it's just one episodic story after another, like a long running comic or a TV show, where you just see these characters that you've grown to be familiar with go through one adventure after another. Now, because Tezuka Osamu's stuff tends to be a little bit dark or tragic, it evidently means that his characters get beat up a lot emotionally and have all sorts of terrible things happen to them. But it is just kind of following these characters on various episodes rather than a coherent story. And obviously he must have I don't know how much planning he did around this. The biography of Buddha, or a very loose version of the biography of Buddha, he seems to be taking all sorts of liberties, is woven in through this. So he must have planned out some of this, but it is, well, who knows how much of this was all planned out beforehand. But yeah, there's Migalia and Tatya and Devadatta. And Devadatta, according to Wikipedia, is, I believe, kind of like the Judas Iscariot of Buddhism. He was like one of Buddha's disciples who turned against him. And the version here with Osamu Tezuka seems to be mostly Tezuka Osamu's invention. But I think that's the loose thing it's based on. So I was a little bit confused here when Devadatta met Buddha, and they seem to be adversaries almost immediately. Arguing already. Kill or be killed. That's the law of survival. That's the world. That's life. No, that is not what Brahman teaches us. But I'm going to get a little bit ahead of myself here. But by the end of that section, Devadatta has come around to become Buddha's disciples. So he talks about spreading his teaching, and people all over the world will become followers and spread his teachings. It's my task to form this organization. I'll be his manager there as of today, is my task. So he has become Buddha's disciple here, although it's very noticeable that he is attracted to Buddha because he can see the miracles that Buddha is working. I guess Buddha is apparently, like Jesus was in Christian mythology, a bit of a miracle worker. So he's attracted to the power of Buddha, and you can already see that this isn't going to end well. So I'm sure his betrayal of Buddha will be coming up in future episodes. Devadatta throughout this series is not portrayed as a nice guy. But the other interesting thing here, the first time Devadatta meets Buddha, where is it? Buddha is talking about his temptation by Mara. This part, and again, I haven't done extensive research on this. I've just kind of gone to Wikipedia. But according to Wikipedia, this is part of the original myth that Buddha, before he reached enlightenment, had to battle Mara, the demon. Mara comes in many guises, seducing me in every possible way. Even now, I cannot escape him. So I think, and again, this is all just based on Wikipedia, but before Buddha reached enlightenment, the devil Mara tried to prevent him from reaching enlightenment by doing various tricks for 7 days, and Buddha had to battle him. Now, again, as somebody who's coming to this knowing nothing about Buddhism, it is not clear to me at all what Mara's angle is on here. Like, why does Mara care why Buddha reaches, whether Buddha reaches enlightenment or not? It just seems, I don't know. I don't know anything about it. And to be perfectly fair, I guess if you were going to play that game, you could ask the same questions about the Christian devil. Like, why does he care how many souls he gets to hell, huh? It's just portrayed as evil for the sake of evil. But the interesting thing about this battle with Mara is it happens off screen. So Devadatta arrives to talk with Buddha. He says, "You seem to be troubled. That's right. I am suffering. How many days did I fight Mara, devil, under the tree?" "That's right. I was possessed by Mara for 7 days and 7 nights. Mara tried to seduce me and corrupt me. On the morning of the 8th day, I thought Mara had retreated, but I was mistaken." So he's retelling the story of his battle with Mara, but you would think that would be an interesting thing to illustrate, right? I mean, I don't want to tell Mr. Tezuka Osamu how to do his job, but it seems like that's a very dramatic story that he just left out in favor of other stuff. So that seems a little bit odd. Sorry, the baby's crying, so I'm just going to stop this and then I'm going to come back in a bit. Okay, I'm back. Let's see how it goes this time. Uh, so the last half of the book, maybe a little bit less than half, is Buddha's story takes center stage again. And this is where Buddha goes to the deer park. Now, again, I've not done any heavy research on this, but I've looked at Wikipedia. The Wikipedia article, at least as of now, is not great. It's a little bit confusing, and it's more concerned about referencing ancient texts than it is like telling the story of what the actual myth is. So bear with me here. I only have a loose understanding of this, but as far as I can glean from Wikipedia, this is part of the original myth. So Buddha, in the original myth, did go to a deer park after reaching enlightenment, where he preached his sermons. And he also, according to Wikipedia, encountered the 5 ascetics who joined him. And here they are here. Now, in the context of this comic, Tezuka Osamu's Buddha, these are all characters that we have seen before, and in fact have been in conflict with Buddha before, especially this guy here. But I think that's just Tezuka Osamu's additions here. The impression I got from Wikipedia is that they entered the 5 ascetics entered Buddha's story at this point. So Buddha tells a couple of different stories. One is the Deer King. Now, it's not entirely sure where Buddha is getting this story, if this is some sort of ancient history that he has access to or something like that. But I got the impression that it's a parable. So, it didn't really happen even within the world of this story. And I Googled this, Buddha, Deer King, and on buddhabelief.net or some website like that, I did find this listed there. So this apparently is an authentic Buddhist story. I think it's I think it's meant to be a parable. So in this story, the king of the humans is shooting down a bunch of deer. The Deer King makes a bargain with him that if they send out 1 deer every day to be sacrificed so the humans can eat venison, then the humans won't come in and do random hunting anymore. So they have this going for some time until there is a doe who's pregnant and doesn't want to sacrifice herself. So the Deer King goes and gets sacrificed himself, and the human king is astonished by that sacrifice. Now the version on whatever that website was, Buddha Belief or something like that, was slightly different. In their version, the Deer King came forward to offer himself to be slaughtered, and instead of being shot with arrows, there was like a chopping block that they put their heads down on. So that was different as well. The Deer King came forward to offer himself to be slaughtered. And then the human king, once he saw that the Deer King was making the offer of sacrificing himself, then the human king said, well, this is certainly a noble act. I can't sacrifice you. Okay, all the deer will be free now. So it's a lot less dark than Tezuka Osamu's version. Tezuka Osamu really likes going for the tragedy whenever possible. He really likes to hit you in the gut. That being said, though, I don't know. Maybe there are multiple versions of this. Maybe in one of the older versions, the Deer King does get slaughtered. I don't know. And then we have another parable, the legend of Cebu the Axe. Now this one I also Googled. Sorry, that's not, there's a few pages of setup. Here's the legend of Cebu the Axe. This one I also Googled and could not find any reference to it, at least to an authentic Buddhist story. When I Googled Buddha Cebu the Axe, I found websites about about this manga. So people were talking about Tezuka Osamu's manga, but I couldn't find any references to it outside of this manga. So I guess maybe this one is not an original Buddhist story. Maybe Tezuka Osamu made this up, or I don't know. Again, somebody let me know if you know. And then, as Buddha is in the deer park, we have the plot intervening again. So the Crystal Prince comes in to conquer this land. And the Crystal Prince is the one who, of course, who conquered Buddha's homeland. Now this, and again with the caveat that I don't really know, I'm just going off of Wikipedia, but as far as I can tell, none of this is part of the original myth. But this is just extra drama. But yeah, they're really amping up the drama here. So thus occurred the destined encounter. Prince Crystal did not know the Samna was Prince Siddhartha of the Shakya royal family, nor was Buddha aware that the prince of the kingdom that had ravaged Kabalavastu and captured his mother and queen. Captured his father, mother, and queen. So, ramping up the drama here, and this is the conflict that makes up the last of the story, but this part is not part of the original myth. Although, as I talked about in previous videos, this character here, what was his name again? I can't remember everyone's name. Rudhaka was a real historical figure, or at least part of the original myth, but did not encounter Buddha with his army like this, at least as far as I can tell. So that's my little 2-bit Wikipedia research on how much of this is authentic and how much of this seems to be invented. As always, if somebody knows more than me, please let me know in the comments. Now, on to Buddha's teaching. So, I know nothing about Buddhism, which in some ways makes me a person ill-suited to review this comic. But in some ways, I think it might make me a perfect person to review this comic, because I can judge as a complete novice how well this comic is teaching me about Buddhism. And I've got to say, it's not teaching me well about Buddhism at all. So I'm 5 volumes in now out of 8, and I really don't understand what the philosophy of Buddhism is. So Buddha sits here and he expounds on the nature of suffering and death. And the first question I have is, okay, where did all this come from? I would have liked to see throughout this very long comic how Buddha's ideas were shaped by his experience, or how he came to these beliefs through his life experience. But that's just not in here at all, and I'm assuming it's not in here because it's not part of the original myth. And to be fair, it's probably not part of the original myth because that part wasn't part of the way that the ancients viewed the world. at least not according to Bart Ehrman. He talks about the difference between ancient biographies and modern biographies. I'm going off on a tangent here, but according to Bart Ehrman, modern biographies talk about how your experience shape you into the person you are. Ancient biographies tend to emphasize how the person, the key characteristics that would define you in adulthood were already semi-present when you were a child. Of course, I think Bart Ehrman was talking about the Western world, but maybe that still applies. I don't know. But Buddha seems to have just gotten all this wisdom from enlightenment. That there's no indication in the story about where a lot of these convictions come from. I mean, he's had a lot of experiences in the story, but they it's like everything else in this comic. They're rather repetitive, and it's not quite clear what the message is. But he's preaching to the deer here, and he's talking about, well, here's what he says. He says, "You deer have to live in constant fear of death. You run away from death every day, but death comes no matter what. Don't be afraid to accept it." And that's one of those things, I read it the first time, and I thought, yeah, that's true. I mean, we as humans, I was talking about deer here, but I guess we living things are so afraid of death. But death is going to come for us anyways. There's no way to escape it. So why don't we just accept it? Don't be afraid to accept it. But then, of course, you think about it for 2 seconds longer, and you think, no, that doesn't make any sense at all. The deer cannot accept death, because if they did, then there will be no more deer. The fact that deer are running away from death every day is why we still have deer. Why the species survives. Some, obviously a lot of them get hunted, but some of them survive to have kids and pass on their offspring, pass on their genes to their offspring. And so it is with humans. I mean, we're obviously, and I don't want to patronize you with dime store philosophy here, but obviously the principal paradox of existence is that we don't want to die, but we are going to die, and we've got to figure out some sort of way to grapple with that somehow. But the fact that we don't want to die is what has kept our species going. I think this was in the Star Trek movie. The fear of death is what keeps us alive. And in fact, Buddha himself, later in the book, is very concerned about saving people from death. So he's saving the deer here from death. Buddha has yeah. Okay, I'll come back to that. The idea that it's important to save people from death, and then he comes to his monk friend or frenemies, Depai here, who's dying, and the other ascetics say, "This was his fate. He finished. He's finished. To be honest, he wasn't all that noble a man. How could you say that? He's severely wounded, and he's fighting for his life. Is there nothing noble in that? But the Reaper is here. He's not dead yet. We'll save him." And so Buddha here is going through all these links and talking about how important it is to save this man's life. Now, how does this come in with accepting death? I don't know. I guess you could get around this somehow. do everything that you can to prolong life as possible, but then accept it when you have to die. It's not terribly clear. Um, yeah, and then he talks about suffering. He's preaching to the five aesthetics here, um, but he's telling them is why his sermons are so popular with the deer. He says, "Deer, their torments stem from being hunted, but what torments humans?" Okay, so now we're on humans here. Illness, poverty, family, work, whatever it is, the torment comes through perception, the sense of smell, taste, sight and hearing, touch. Okay, so fair enough. That is the problem of existence. But then what's the solution? So the remedy for such suffering is eightfold. And that is to see rightly, to think rightly, to speak rightly, to work rightly, to live rightly, to strive rightly, to pray rightly, and to stay right. We, the living, do not exist to be tormented, to suffer. Don't you find that kind of life to be meaningless? And then he talks about how the trial by ordeals is meaningless. Now, I mentioned there was a lot of repetition in this series. This is something that was already covered in a previous volume. But I don't know. I mean, to a certain extent, I can kind of see the logic here. And this is maybe similar to some of the things Jordan Peterson talks about in some of his lectures. You can't hope to be happy in life because there's too much suffering. So you can hope to be useful, to get some sort of satisfaction out of making some sort of contribution to other people. In fact, I think he says it somewhat more directly. But that, I don't know. That to me seems to only go for so far. That in itself will not get you out of the really heavy suffering of life. As well as it strikes me that the really difficult thing about living a good life, I mean this is just so elementary. Just be a good person and everything will be okay. But how to be a good person is really that's really the issue, isn't it? The fact that we get tired and cranky and we have a hard time balancing the time we need for ourselves to recharge our batteries and the time that we spend for other people and the time that we have to spend with our families and the time that we spend working and just not to mention just the constant temptation to self-justify your actions or find a way to trick yourself into thinking that what you're doing is good even though it's not really good. I mean, to just tell people to live rightly, to work rightly. I feel like I got that lesson in like 6 years old, first grade. Be a good person. Do what's good. Now, it could well be, in fact, I'm sure it is, that Buddhist philosophy is much more sophisticated than the version I'm getting in this comic. But I'm reviewing this comic, if this is meant to be an introduction to Buddha, this is what I'm coming away with, and I'm not terribly impressed. I mean, the other thing, Buddhism just doesn't seem to make any sense to me. I mean, he's talking about how all life is sacred and how you've got to take care of all the deer. So he's saving this deer from the ants. He's spends a lot of time caring for the deer in this section. Oh yeah. Here's another part. Dear, you are only concerned about yourselves, your own survival, but that is wrong. You must help others. In order to live, that is what you must do with your lives. Sorry, that had nothing to do with what I was just talking about, but I thought that was another quote that seemed to indicate his philosophy. And again, it seems to me to be not wrong as far as it goes. In order to find meaning in life, you have to be concerned with more than your own survival. You have to do something meaningful with your life, but that's just really basic stuff, and kind of the how to do that is a real tricky thing. But yeah, so the ants apparently can get burned away without any. I mean, the ants, the whole circle of life thing does not. Sorry, circle of life is the wrong thing, but the sacredness of life thing does not seem to extend to the ants. And the Buddhist philosophy of never killing any living thing, except the ants, I guess. If that is the philosophy, that seems to be Buddha's philosophy. Then you would pretty soon have to be dealing with an overpopulation problem at this deer park, right? I mean, deer need to be culled periodically, right? So I don't know. I don't know. So I'm confused about the philosophy. I'll see if I can gain anything useful out of volume 6, 7, and 8. I am on the whole enjoying the comic and the story, though. It's for all its faults, and I'm sure you can tell this just by looking at these pictures. It's very visually appealing, very eye-catching, very easy to read. And yeah, we'll see what I get out of it as I continue through the other volumes.